I began the miniature by priming it black with an overcoat of Sky Gray by K 3rd Gen. You can do this by dry brushing, you could use a sponge, or you could just paint it on if you'd like, but I just opted for my airbrush because it's what I prefer. It's not a necessary step, but it is useful for finding out where you're going to be highlighting, and this will be supported by contrast paints such as this Storm Fiend over the blue areas. My Strike Gundam tutorial for Gundam Assemble had a full instruction on how to establish your bases with contrast, but I'm not quite doing that here. I'm setting up a few color with the contrast, but then I'm moving on to typical normal painting. And so really this step isn't completely necessary. This contrast is Griff Charger Gray, and we're just going to go over the bird with this. And then we can hit the pants with some Basilicanum Gray. To start off the leather, I used Scorched Earth by Two Thin Coats. I just wanted to get some color in overall on the mini before I start the blue, so I know how far I'm going in terms of extremeness in that blue, which we will begin with Eldar Row by Two Thin Coats. And with this, you're going to go with an overall base coat. However, you do want to make sure that you are leaving some of those shadows that were created by your contrast paint in there. When you're doing your brush strokes, you always want to make sure your strokes are going towards your source of light, so where the sun would be hitting the model. This will make it easier to establish your highlights, but also it'll make it look more natural, like the light is hitting it in the way it should be. And this is what it looks like with those base coats completed, and you can see how I've utilized those shadows created by the contrast paints. And we're simply going to be building up our highlights from there, so those shadows are quite important to establish our contrast. We'll continue upwards with our colors with the next color in the triad, Relic Blue by Two Thin Coats. And I don't really like painting blue. I find it actually pretty difficult to get colors that kind of blend into each other. But this triad by Two Thin Coats is really good, so I would suggest looking it up. If you don't have Two Thin Coats, there is a conversion chart down in the description below. While I am building up my brighter colors, I am stippling to create some texture to make it look more interesting. If you watched my tutorials before, you've seen me do it. I do it a lot. This phase of the blue is done, and you can see it is quite a bit brighter than our previous phase, but that's all right. We will be doing some glazing to bring everything together in the future. But we're going to be continuing with highlighting first, and we're going to do that with Seafarer Blue by Two Thin Coats. And it is quite the bright blue, so you do want to be relatively reserved. That said, I did want to have this shoulder as a relatively bright focal point, so the sun's hitting directly that spot, so I'm going to be highlighting there a lot more. The Feudom blue is nice and ice-like, so we do want to make sure that our color is fairly bright, but we want to make sure those contrasting colors are in there as well. Even in the shadowed areas, you do want to highlight the edges of the cloth. That way we have them a little bit more defined than just dark. And an easy way to bring even more intensity into your mini is to double up on your layers, even if it seems like it's solid, just to bring up the saturation of the color you're working with. And there, that layer is complete, and you can see it's looking a little rough, but that's okay. That glaze is going to help things out. Now to continue on, we're going to add some ice yellow into our previous blue, and that'll produce our final highlight, and it is quite bright. So you only want to hit those edges, as well as a bit more of that focal area in the shoulder that I discussed earlier. And especially in those areas that are going to be darker because the sun's not hitting it, you only need a tiny, tiny bit to make a big difference. All right, with that final highlight done, everything's looking nice and bright, but it is a little bit of a rough transition, so that's where our glaze is going to help us. So we're going to take Relic Blue and create a glaze, and that means that it's mostly water and not so much paint, and it's a very, very thin consistency. And as we glade, we always want our brush strokes to go towards the shadows. In general, you do want to avoid the brightest colors that you've painted, but you can get a little bit of it in this case, just to bring it down just a notch. And this isn't a one-layer pony. You can do this as many times as you want, and it'll just increase the colors as well as smooth out the blends. Following that, you can go back to your brightest highlight color and do some re-edge highlightings because you might have hit those and you want them bright. All right, for the pants, we're going to be mixing some Shadow Blue by Two Thin Coats into our Basilicanum Gray and just doing an overall coat with that. Once again, leave those shadows created by the contrast paint intact. The shadow blue is going to help add a blue tone, which will kind of marry it together with the rest of the mini. Following that, just add a little bit more of that shadow blue into your mixture and use that as a highlight. And then for a final highlight, I just use pure shadow blue. If you want, you can take this even brighter and then glaze it back down, but I chose not to. The pants aren't really that important. To start highlighting our dark leathers, we're going to take Fur Coat by 2 Thin Coats and mix it in with our Scorched Earth. And you can apply this as an overall coat, leaving those Scorched Earth that you did earlier as a shadow. Then you can move on and highlight with Pure Fur Cloak. This color is strong and we do want these leathers dark, so be reserved with it. So just work with it a little bit as a nice contrasting color to the darkness of our previous colors. And if you want to increase the saturation, you can just add a second layer. Just be even more reserved with that. And once you're done with that, you can just add some ice yellow into the fur cloak and then continue highlighting. Now this does get very bright, so like I said earlier, you just want to be more reserved with it. Just use less paint, be picky about where you're putting it. It will be our brightest point for these dark leathers, so less is definitely more. To do the whites, we're just going to do very simply, starting with Warm Gray by AK 3rd Generation. This is a nice off-white that's easy to apply and also easy to highlight over. And to highlight, we'll just add some ice yellow into it and paint it over those areas that we want highlighted. That'll be an easy transition from the warm gray and it'll pop nicely. For the brighter leathers, we're going to start with Gizmo Fur by 2 Thin Coats. This will go over all the accessories as well as the gloves. We're going to follow that up with Manticore Ochre, also by 2 Thin Coats, and we're going to highlight it the same way we did with the previous leather, just kind of be a little bit more on the reserve side so that way the contrast of the dark and the light can do a lot of work. Then we'll do a final highlight of that Manticore Ochre plus some ice yellow. Try to have sharp lines and add some texture if you would like with some stippling and slash marks. Leather always looks better a little bit distressed. If you think you want too bright with the gloves, you can always water down some Agaros Dunes contrast and utilize that as a glaze to bring it all down. This will also help provide a bit more of a general shade to all of those crevices. Then we're going to move on to the bird, and I thought the contrast was a bit too much, so I'm watering down some Tenebrous Gray by AK 3rd Gen, and I'm just kind of coating the entire bird. And as we're doing this, brush inwards towards the inside of the feathers to make sure that the shadows stop where they're supposed to. Following that, we'll mix our Sky Gray into our Tenebrous Gray and begin to kind of build a base coat while allowing those shadows to stay. This is pretty difficult. These wings don't have a lot of surface area, so get a thin brush and try to be careful as you work. To really start highlighting the bird, we'll just take some more Sky Gray into our mixture and then we will do some smaller marks. You can be almost random with the points that you're highlighting, and that way it looks a little bit more ruffled. But as you get down to those larger feathered parts of the wings, you can add more just to get it all brighter. Now, generally when you're doing feather textures on wings, you kind of do a highlight in like an arrow pattern. But that takes a long time and I want to do this faster. So I found it easy just to have very little paint on your brush and just to do quick lines to kind of create that feathery look. And once you're done with all that, you can just take pure Sky Gray and just slowly highlight like you did before. Once again, just painting less and less as you go on. You don't have to hit everything. You can do a little bit in, you can do a little bit out on those feathers and it will look great. The contrast will do a lot of work. Now, similar to how I did those feather textures in the back, I'm going to be doing some stripes of warm gray in the front of the feathers. For this, I'm taking my time and making sure that they do look nice and not as wild as I did on the back. And this is to make the bird look a little bit more like a peregrine falcon. And to get that falcon look, I'll also be doing the chest with that warm gray as well. And you can just do little bits of it, it'll look great, but once it dries, you can just add a second coat to really punch that saturation in there. And then after that, you can just add some ice yellow in there and get another highlight. And yes, you can even do the stripes and the wings, although that's honestly a lot of work. For the beaks and the talons, we're going to take Sahara Yellow by AK 3rd Gen and just apply it over everything as a base coat. We're then going to follow that up with a mixture of Sand Yellow by AK 3rd Gen as well, and that Sahara Yellow, and just do a general highlight. We're only going to do a little bit, mostly on the top of the beak, as well as some of those crucial joints on the talons. And then, like with our bright leathers, we'll just water down some Agaros Dunes contrast paint and apply it over as a general wash. And you can repeat it as much as you'd like until you get the desired effect. And there we have it, our Feudom Royal Falconer support model is all complete. I really like that lovely ice blue that the Feudom has, and I think I did a great job capturing it. My channel's been open for over a year now, and my very first video was a Warcrow model, so it's very cool to be coming back to the game system. I have a lot of words about the general material that they use for the Warcrow models, but I'll save that. Thanks for watching the video, like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I'll catch you in the next one.